In the immortal words of William Wallace, freedom!
Ted Cruz quoting movie character with a loose tie to actual history, and it actually feels on point as the annual CPAC conservative convention kicked off today in Orlando. Now, if you thought the party of Trump had changed at all since Capitol riots and the GOP's election losses, you ought to think again.
So please, everyone, when you're in the ballroom, when you're seated, you should still be wearing a mask. So if everybody can go ahead, work on that. I know it's not the most fun.
You have the right.
Yes, booing masks. The convention, which is always looking to the future of conservatism and the GOP, was thought to be a referendum on the divide in the party and its relationship, and a complicated one, with Donald Trump. Sort of like the divide we saw among House Republican leaders Kevin McCarthy and Liz Cheney just yesterday.
Do you believe President Trump should be speaking, or former President Trump should be speaking at CPAC this weekend?
Yes, he should.
Congresswoman Cheney?
That's up to CPAC. I've been clear in my views about President Trump and the extent to which following January 6th, I don't believe that he should be playing a role in the future of the party or the country.
On that high note, thank you all very much.
By the way, check out McCarthy's eyes as the question goes to Cheney. He knows what's coming, and he winces as a wince of a man who just wants it all to disappear, if it only was that easy. But then, there is no divide, though, at CPAC. It is all Trump all the time. His critics, they didn't get the invite. Some of his supporters wheeled in a golden statue, I kid you not, of Trump as a sort of Uncle Sam, putting Trump above country, not to mention violating the First Commandment. Now, Trump, he is set to speak on Sunday, a revenge speech we expect, in which he is expected to talk about the attacks on his critics, including fellow Republicans. He's also going to be speaking after the convention's straw poll, which he will win, so Trump will finally be able to give the victory speech he had to eat in November. But make no mistake, this is Trump's party and his convention. The number 2 star this weekend, Trump's big election lie. It is already starting to stage on day one.
So don't tell me that vote fraud is just some right-wing hallucination. The November 2020 election was a nightmare.
A nightmare. Republicans, they had a moment to put Trump in the rearview mirror, but instead they try to have things both ways. First, the leadership criticized Trump, like what we heard from Mitch McConnell after the impeachment vote.
The mob was fed lies. They were provoked by the president and other powerful people.
Okay, but then some of the same voices embraced Trump should he win the 2024 GOP nomination.
What happened in the past is not something relevant now. We're moving forward.
If the president was the party's nominee, would you support him?
The nominee of the party? Absolutely.
Remember, that was McConnell who said that they should pursue criminal charges against the president for his involvement. And now, hey, all's forgiven if he's the nominee. And you can say the same thing about House Leader Kevin McCarthy. Here he is bashing Trump the night of the riots in the Capitol.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding.
But just a few days later, McCarthy, he decided, hey, why not? I'm going to head down to Mar-a-Lago and in the process kiss Trump's ring and whatever else, begging for access to Trump's donor lists. Now, even Nikki Haley, one of the few 2024 wannabes that were part of the Trump administration that didn't get the taint of it on it while she served under him, she asked to make the trek to Mar-a-Lago after some of her criticism of Trump. For his point, Trump refused to even give her an audience. So the question is, how do Republican voters feel about Trump? We'll take a look at the polls. 6 in 10 Trump voters last November want him to run again in 2024. And of those, 85% say they'd vote for him again if he was the nominee. Now, majority of Republicans overall say he is their first choice when it comes to who should be the standard bearer in 4 years, with nearly half of all Trump voters saying not only would they vote for him again, but they'd join a third party if Trump started one. That's how deep their loyalty goes. So what should sane observers make out of the insanity at CPAC and of today's Republican Party? Well, for that, let's bring in Zach Wamp. Zach's a conservative Republican, and he was a congressman representing Tennessee's 3rd congressional district from 95 to 2011. That's, of course, before the dawn of the Trump era. He's pushing back on the QAnonization of the party. And I'm curious, Congressman, there was a choice, and I saw what McCarthy said on the floor of the night of the riots, and I certainly saw after the votes were cast in the Senate what Mitch McConnell said. But already we're seeing backtracking from that. Are you surprised that some people who chose to lay down the gauntlet are now rethinking the proposition?
Well, first of all, I think it's as big a story who's not at CPAC as it is who is at CPAC, because there are a lot of key players, major presidential contenders, very conservative Republicans who are not at CPAC this year. So the CPAC crowd may actually be shrinking, but it's the only thing to cover right now around President Trump. A lot of the media like to continue to focus on him. So that's why you're seeing a lot of this noise. But I am surprised, frankly, that you have certain members that seem to be on both sides of this issue. But fear, Richard, is a powerful emotion, and it drives a lot of people, especially in politics. And there are a lot of Republicans that are still afraid that the Trump world will work against them in their primaries in 2 years if they don't publicly profess their allegiance to him, even though his base in the party is now about half the party instead of 85% of the party. It's definitely shrunk from 85% to about half the party is with Trump.
Well, it's an interesting point you make about who's not there, but I got a question. Do you think Nikki Haley or Mike Pence aren't there because they're not invited, or if they showed up, they're afraid they'd get booed?
Well, some of both. I mean, there's certain members, but they're real stalwarts like Dan Crenshaw, who I think just set it out. Why is Tim Scott not there? I mean, there are some really good Republicans that aren't there. Some cases they didn't get invited. Some cases they actually don't really want to be associated with the Matt Gaetz crowd. You know, the people who voted to object, frankly, are not going to be the Republican nominees in 2024. And that includes Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz. They're not going to be the party's nominee because they voted to overturn the Electoral College. That really is the fundamental question here. And obviously, those people and the president's unwillingness to accept the Electoral College result they contributed to what happened on January the 6th. Whether they want to admit it or not, it did. And if Republicans don't embrace the Electoral College, we may never win a national election again, because the big blue urban areas, the popular vote, are moving the other way. Frankly, the Electoral College certified the result on December the 14th, and everybody that failed to accept that is partially responsible for both the collapse of the Republican Party, or the division in the Republican Party, and it is split right down the middle, and frankly, the unrest that happened in and around January the 6th.
I know you know this, but I think it's amazing when we get Liz Cheney is not some bleeding heart liberal, let alone a moderate. She's a rock-ribbed conservative. I mean, look at her last name, for crying out loud. And we saw this play out in a clip I just showed our audience when they were asked about, you know, should Trump basically be the keynote at CPAC. She and McCarthy gave clearly different opinions and walked in different directions. I know you grew up at the idea of the Reagan Republican Party, a Big Tent party. They wouldn't recognize the party today, that you couldn't have somebody disagree with you, that you're worried about will their political future end at the next primary.
This demonstrates how divided our party is. When the leadership of House Republicans actually have a press event and one goes in one direction and the other goes in diametrically the other direction, then we have a major split in the party. But the Cheney family is old school conservative, even to the point of being criticized brutally by everyone in the middle and the left as being too conservative. And now she's somehow a squish, you know, or a traitor in some people's minds, which is just asinine. Now, Kevin McCarthy is within 5 votes of becoming the Speaker of the House. And that's what he's trying to do in the midterms. is he's calculated if I bring Trump back in and I embrace him, maybe his passion and his network and his money can help us win those 5 seats and I become the speaker. He's not looking at 2024. He's not looking at the future of the party or even the future of the country. Unfortunately, he selfishly wants to be speaker, and he's trying to figure out how to do that. Liz Cheney, history's on her side, actually, because you see which way this thing is moving. The Trump base is shrinking the further we get away, the more hearings there are around January the 6th.
I hear you, but I think McCarthy, forget the morality part of it, I think the math part of it, he's misreading this in that, first of all, anybody who thinks that you're going to be able to co-opt Trump or he's going to give you his support here that you can count on, at the same time you can control where he's going to go with the message, has been living in a dream world for the last 4 years. He's going to do whatever he wants to do on his own terms, and he doesn't care about the party. He cares about Trump. But secondly, to get back those 5 seats, you got to get back some of the suburbs. And I watched Marjorie Taylor Greene basically railroad that Equality Act thing. You could have had conservatives take their positions, but now they're all going to be labeled that they sided with her, which ain't going to win seats in these suburbs. I just don't get how McCarthy thinks he can control uncontrollable wings of his party and let them get megaphones, and somehow he'll frame it a year and a half from now, Zach, that, you know, that's the Republican Party. It's as if he was amnesiac for the last 4 years.
So I've been in this for over 40 years, and I can tell you from working as a Republican leader at every level, from starting at the precinct level, county party level, that his calculation is a miscalculation. You're exactly right. In fact, voters do not look in the rearview mirror. It's very rare that anybody comes from losing in the past to winning in the future. The country looks forward. The next elections in 22 and 24, the voters will be looking at the future.
Well, it's going to be an interesting weekend here, and I have a feeling we're going to be talking about what the president said on Monday, given a speech on Sunday. Congressman Wamp, I always appreciate the time with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
All right, everybody, a quick reminder. The CPAC conference, as I mentioned, it goes on all weekend, and our coverage of it, it will continue Monday. Right here on the program, we'll be joined by good friend Chris Shays, himself a former Republican congressman from Connecticut, who at one time was the only Republican in Congress representing all of New England. We're going to get his reaction to what happened at CPAC and the Trump fealty it will feature. Again, that's Monday, coming up at 6 o'clock right here on RFL. Up next, the state of Black America as Black History Month comes to a close. We're going to bring in 2 prominent voices for their take as we transition from Trump to Biden.